Support for Storyophonic comes from AEA ribbon mics and preamps, crafting the world's finest ribbon microphones and preamps for the modern artist and engineer. To learn more, go to aearibbonmics.com. Ready to make hits at home? Now through December 31st, purchase and register any new Apollo Twin or Aero audio interface and get the iconic sounds heard on thousands of hit records with exclusive UAD plugins from Neve, Fender, Lexicon, and UA. Absolutely free. Find out more at universalaudio.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of Storyophonic, a regular conversation series with tips and tales from deep inside the music industry. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or at our website, storyophonic.com. We appreciate you taking a minute to review or rate our podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Now let's meet the host of Storyophonic, Dan Kimpel, and today's special guest.
Teresa James describes her authentic artistry as music from the roadhouse. With her hard-hitting band, Teresa James and the Rhythms Tramps, she mines a rich vein of blues and roots influences, which she overlays with a gritty vocal prowess.
It's not about the singer, it's the song. I figure if I sell the song, then I'm going to sell myself. Right? I mean, to me, that's how it goes. And that's why on my CDs, there's lots of different kinds of songs. I don't sound the same, I don't think, on every song because it's, what does it need? How do I bring this emotion or this idea out?
Performing at concerts and festivals across the U.S. and on soundtracks and sessions, she is proof positive that timeless songs and dedicated artists will always have an audience. You can hear it all on her latest release, Here in Babylon, and right now, Teresa James rips it up on Storyophonic.
Why'd you have to go talk like that? You and me, we go a long way back. Sticks and stones can hurt, but words can too. Bridge didn't burn, was that what you were trying to do? Didn't have to go across that line. I know time's been tough, but we've both been trying. You pick your battles if it gains you ground. I just don't understand why you're bringing me down. I know you.
Teresa, welcome to Storyophonic.
Well, thank you. It's really nice to be here.
I was debating whether or not to do this, but I think I will. You and I had an opportunity to work together once in the past, but it was not with me as an interviewer. It was with me as an event producer. And the event was called Meet the Composer, and it was at the WGA Theater in Beverly Hills. And it was honoring a composer and songwriter named Randy Newman.
Oh,
and
that
you
was
came
such a cool
and you
thing.
sang Feels Like Home. You remember that?
Yeah, how could I forget? That's one of the highlights of things that I've ever done. It was so exciting. I've always been such a huge Randy Newman fan. And for the Screen Actors Guild Singers Committee to invite me, and I thought, well, that's cool. And then I go to the rehearsal and I find out that not only is I'm singing one of two songs, but I've got this huge choir of all the absolute best singers in not just LA, but in the whole industry standing behind me singing as a choir. I was so overwhelmed. It was scary.
It's a great community of people.
It really is. And I mean, I know a lot of them,
Yes.
but still to have them all there together, just looking at me going, okay, go, you know?
Right. I remember the night so well because, we had never done this before. It was the first time that the committee had ever done it. And they brought me in to produce because I had a background doing that. And we just made it up as we went. We just made it up.
It was such a fun evening.
It was
and
really fun.
Well, yeah.
And Randy Newman, like, what are you going to do? So, but let's talk about Randy Newman for a second. You know Randy. You've worked with Randy.
I've worked with him a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. I don't really know him. I mean, if he walked in, he wouldn't go, "Oh, hi," But he's just, I just have been such a fan. When the Good Old Boys album came out, to me, and that still is one of my top 5 all-time ever. He's just one of the best songwriters, and I've seen him perform by himself many times. And it was such a thrill to be in the studio with him. I've done a couple of movie things and a couple of album things with him. And
yeah. It makes sense for you to sing his songs because he's got that Southern thing.
He does.
As you know, I'm sure as you know, he grew up out here, but his grandparents lived in Louisiana, so he'd spend summers.
I always wondered about that.
They would take the train down there.
Because he has such a handle on that, on that stuff. It's funny. My son's a musician now, and he's on the road. He's heading to Birmingham, and all I can think of is Birmingham. Love that. That's cool. I didn't know you were a part of that. You were behind the scenes.
Oh, I was actually handling Randy that night. I ended up just being with Randy in the green room most of the night because we didn't have anybody to do that. So that became, because I'd already done everything else, putting it together, but it's so much fun.
His sense of humor, and he's just so offhand and so hysterical.
He's very conversational too. And he shows a lot of interest in other people, which I think is a very interesting quality for him.
Yeah.
It's not just all about him.
Well, and also you can tell that inspires his music.
Yeah.
Too.
I've been spending a lot of time with your record, a number of your records, but most recently here in Babylon.
Oh, great.
Yeah. I've got to, I'm going to sit down and talk to you about this. I'd have to be able to play in the band and sing backup for you, which you wouldn't want, trust me. But it's a wonderful record. It's got your band is so greasy.
Yeah. It really it's got kind of that sideways thing going on.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Thank you.
And I was interested in the use of Babylon. There's a song, called Here in Babylon, which is the title track, obviously. And I was always interested in the use of the word Babylon or the phrase Babylon, So, it's in the Bible, as you know. It's in the Old Testament as a locale. It's in the New Testament, very scary, in the book of Revelations. It's in Rastafarian culture as a land of oppression. How do you see Babylon?
As just as a place where a hedonistic kind of place where there really aren't many rules, and people tend to just do whatever they want, and where things are verging on being out of control, kind of. You know what I mean? It's where there's a power thing going. I mean, not to get too political about it,
sure.
but I mean,
you may.
But where it's just where there's grand things going on for some people, and then there's the just the slaves, and just mainly the hedonistic atmosphere where people. There's too much of everything.
Oh, interesting. Could draw a correlation maybe in a way to another one of your songs called Hollywood Way, which for those of us who live in LA, there's a street called Hollywood Way.
Right, exactly.
Right. But Hollywood Way as used in the song is well, it's the way that it works in Hollywood,
Right.
And you've been around that.
Absolutely. Hollywood, every time I go there, it's just got such a different feeling here. But my husband actually wrote that song, and I love the part where it goes, there's 4 sides to every story. There's your side and my side and the truth, and then what sells, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of true. It's like, which is kind of a mix of everything.
Yeah.
But you're right. I never thought about those 2 songs, but they...
Yeah, it was interesting parallels in some ways. With Here in Babylon, and it's great, your husband is an amazing writer and plays with you, and that must be great to have another musician right there in the house.
It is. Yeah. It really is, and we work well together. Honestly, that's one of the main things that we actually ever fuss about. It's just like, I just remember years ago. Now we've really settled. We've been together a long time, so we've really settled into the working relationship and how it goes, and we complement each other really well, I think. But I just remember years ago, coming on the way home from a gig, and I'm thinking, that was great, man. That was so much fun. It was killer. And him saying, God, that was torture, It was horrible. And I'm thinking, oh, man, really? Okay. But we really are a good match for each other because he tends to be more focused and very exacting, and he hears, like, oh, that's off, this, does that kick drum sound, whatever kind of thing. And I tend to be more of the large picture of how does it feel?
Sure.
Does it feel good? If it feels fine to me, then I don't care if something's a little tweaky. So it's good. We're a good foil for each other. He'll want to change it, and I'll say, no, let's leave it. Or
as I mentioned in our brief intro, you are originally from Houston, Texas, which is an amazing music town historically. So many incredible people from there. Blues people, country people. I mean, right head, right?
Well, yeah. And did you know, I mean, one of the songs that influenced me the most was Big Mama Thornton's Hound Dog. I mean, I was kind of grooving along with, just folk and rock and whatever, and then when I heard that with that jungle beat and her huge voice and all, and that was recorded in Houston.
Yes. Big Mama was amazing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
And that opened a whole door to me to start looking in that direction. Sister Rosetta and all, all those big women.
Yeah, in many ways. I wanted to ask you, when you were growing up, did they still have ice house bars?
Yes, and that's so funny. We were just lamenting the disappearance. It's like I keep thinking this would be a great town for ice houses. And those of you who don't know what an ice house is, it's just like a little, sometimes it would be like an old filling station, which I guess I should say gas station, or just a little shack somewhere, just where they would open up the garage door and there's guys sitting around playing checkers and a tub full of ice and beer, and people would go after work and have a beer, and just a meeting place. And I remember before I left Houston, I remember once I'm looking in the phone book, and under ice houses, there were like 5 pages of the tiniest print you've ever seen of listing all the ice houses. What made you think of that? That's crazy.
I had interviewed a songwriter from Houston, Texas, named Rodney Crowell.
Of course.
A very famous songwriter. And he told me about it. He had a reference to it in he had an album called The Houston Kid, and he had a reference to ice houses. And I didn't know what that was. And I asked him about it, and he explained it to me. And it sounded really interesting.
No, it's really funny. What's funny is that the corner near where I live in Santa Clarita, there's right where the freeway, it's it used to be a boat place. And there's like a little building and a little patio, like where they used to hang the boats or whatever. And every time I drive by, I think, we should open an ice house there, man. We should just do it,
It's an interesting tradition. It's sort of, music as community is a big factor. And especially because you do come from the Americana/blues kind of place where, blues is so interesting because it's so, it's a cliche to say it's timeless, but it always bubbles under. And then sometimes it bubbles over. And sometimes it looks like it's gone away for a second. And then an artist like Gary Clark Jr. comes out and it's all reinvented over and over again.
It's true. And then you've got Joe Bonamassa, who's huge, enormous, and he is attracting a younger audience. That's the big concern in the blues community is that the audience is aging, But blues really is timeless, and the cool thing about blues, I'm actually not a blues purist, as you know, by any means. Mm-hmm. I'm more from the blues sensibility of things coming from the heart, and having the thing about blues is that the form is so simple that it gives the musicians and the singers so much more room to express themselves. I think I mentioned earlier, I was teaching a blues improv class, and that's what the thing about blues songs is every person that does it differently. And there are some songs that have completely different sets of lyrics. Like there's some songs that have like 25 verses, depending on what the artist was feeling like at the time. And that's what when I was teaching the blues improv, I'd say, I don't care necessarily if you sing the exact right words. It doesn't, because all of like blues and roots music, which is really where I'm from, was based from the old oral tradition. You know, you go somewhere and you hear somebody sing a song. This is, before recorded times, and then so you go home and you, man, this guy sang the coolest song, and then you would sing it and you would remember some of it and some of it you wouldn't, and then you would make it up, and then someone would hear you sing it, and then they would move it on, and it's because that's it. It's not about being exact or being perfect. It's about the feeling and the emotion of it. That's where I'm coming from in pretty much everything I do.
You attract a lot of great players.
I have been so fortunate in my career. Really, really, I get to play with some of the most amazing people, and I have for so many years.
I love you use horns.
Yeah. I loved what they bring, and I've been so fortunate. My horn players are, amazing.
Yeah.
And the arrangements that they come up with and stuff.
And as you mentioned, having that much room or that much space for improvisation. Actually, horns, you don't want them to improvise. I mean, you improvise solos, but you probably don't want them improvising all the way through. Unless you're doing
I've
Charles
actually worked
High.
with guys like that. You're like, it's like, just, if you don't mind, just maybe listen to the song before you start playing. Don't just come in.
But I would think also with the quality of the players that you have, it must be easier, for them to understand what you need, and part of being a musician is not just being able to play it, but it's understanding what needs to be played.
That's true. And understanding when not to play.
That's that.
Which is also, for me, a big thing. I've never been... That's the one thing that bothers me now about young singers coming up is because their role models tend to sing over everything. Mm-hmm. They never leave any space, hardly, and they do a lot more notes than are really necessary, and it's... Years ago, I toured, I don't know if you know who Kirk Whalum is.
Sure.
He's a jazz sax player. He's from Houston, and we used to play I don't want to say when, but I would be in like the little not rock club, but the little rootsy club, and there was a jazz club right around the corner, the big jazz club, and so he would be playing there, and we would on our breaks, we would go and check each other out, and we got to be pals, and he did an album years ago, in the Memphis style. And so he brought me in to sing a bunch of tunes, and I went on the road with him, and it was interesting because he was really known as an urban jazz guy. And of course, he grew up with a love of Memphis style soul kind of stuff, and so he would start out the program, and then he would bring me in, and we would do those. And you could just see, for so many reasons, the audience just kind of sit back and kind of, when they'd see me come on stage, and he would start doing those other types of songs. And I mean, I think I won them over for the most part, but it was interesting because more than once someone would go, that's really interesting the way you just kind of sing the song. You don't really, it's just like people nowadays aren't used to hearing just melodies.
I also know when I listen to you, your time, you also are a rhythm singer.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Yeah, I
my
hear that.
Favorite.
That's neat.
Thing. Well, who was a big influence on me is Billie Holiday, and she could just wrap the melody around the music so careful, just so soulfully and so sweetly. And when I really discovered the fun of phrasing was when I used to play in hotel lounges by myself. And you're playing and you're singing and you're thinking and you realize that no one is paying any attention at all to you, So then I'd just start going, I think I'll just stretch this phrase, and then I'll catch it, and then I'll do this, And then it's like, I think I'll go up here. Oh, what if I did this? What if I left these words out and didn't even, you know what I mean? And it was just, that's when I really started developing not only my style, but the confidence. And when I realized that really, as a performer and as a singer, I need to do it for myself first. If you're always just trying to please whoever's there, no one's going to be happy because there's an artifice, there's a falseness, I think, and that's what I learned from Aretha, bless her soul, is, it's the meaning, it's the song. It's always about the song and the meaning of the words in the song and the melody. It's not about the singer. It's the song. I figure if I sell the song, then I'm going to sell myself. right? I mean, to me, that's how it goes. And that's why on my CDs, there's lots of different kinds of songs. I don't sound the same, I don't think, on every song because it's, what does it need? How do I bring this emotion or this idea out?
Yeah, especially if it's a song that we know. On Bonafide, you cover a John Hyatt song, "Have a Little Faith in Me," which is an amazing song, and I love the way that you do that.
Well, I've always done that song in my live show ever since his "Bring the Family" came out with that on it.
That's right.
And it's one of my favorite all-time songs to sing because it's got so much air, it's got so much space, and the lyrics are just so simple and so great. But I had always said, I don't want to ever record it. I always want it to be free. I want it to breathe. I don't want it to be locked into one version of it, and also it's been covered. It's been covered so many times. And I just thought, I don't want to do that. But then when we were doing Bonafide, I fell in love with the Five Royales, this group from the 50s.
Yeah.
I just fell in love with them. And we'd started doing their song, I Like It Like That.
Yes.
And so we thought, well, let's go in, let's put that on the CD because it's always good to, it's actually kind of obscure, but it's also fun to do things people have heard. So we go into our friend Johnny Lee's studio, get all set up. We start doing, we get sound, we do I Like It Like That, like once or maybe twice, and then we're done. It was done, and then so we're all like dressed up, and we're sitting there going, well, okay, well, you know what? Let's just go ahead. Let's just put down "Have a Little Faith." Maybe we'll put it on somewhere someday, release, whatever. And so it was really kind of an accident that we put it on the record because like I said, it's one of those songs, too, that I don't do every show. Mm-hmm. It's a big favorite. People always request it. But there's certain songs that I don't want them to get tired.
Sure.
I want them to be, I've retired songs for years, actually, and then brought them back just to keep them kind of fresh. We do a version of the old Al Cooper, Donny Hathaway, "I Love You More Than You'll Ever Know." And it's, it's real dramatic and a showstopper and the big high notes and the big long, the whole thing, and I rarely ever do it. Just so that when I do it, then I can totally lose myself into it. And I'm not, when you do something over and over and you end up doing the same things, and I really try in my singing to always be in the moment and to be fearless, to go ahead and just go for it. As I've gotten older, as my husband says, my give-a-shitter has gone down. I've turned my give-a-shitter off. And I don't have any fear anymore. Yeah. So it's just like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to see if I go up really to that really high note, and I'm experienced enough that, if it doesn't really work, then I know how to get out of it gracefully so that people aren't going to, go, whoa. They'll just go, whatever.
Your points of reference are great. The Five Royales is, probably the best known song of the Five Royales is dedicated to the one I love.
Which is weird because it's not really that much like, most of their songs, Loman Pauly, or I think that's his name. But he was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I just love, we do a bunch of, I am in my band, the Queen Cake. We do several of their songs. Oh. In fact, I was just turning another friend of ours who was visiting onto them, and I just found another song I just love. It was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It just keeps going, but it's so much fun.
What's it called?
Yeah, exactly.
That's so great. Because you have this broader definition of yourself as an artist. It really gives you freedom to bring a lot of different kinds of things into you if you want to do them, right? You can
and that's,
Teresa-ize them.
It's a joy for me, but it has been a problem in the business because especially it's not so bad anymore because the market has just opened up so much. But, it was always, I was too blues for country and too country for blues before. I look at Delbert McClinton, who's brilliant and one of the best singers we've ever had and a brilliant songwriter. And he came from Fort Worth, which is another huge mine of musicians and music. But growing up in Texas, you're exposed to so many things. I mean, there's always the blues, and then there's country, and there's Western music, which is totally different from country music. And then you've got the Louisiana influence, and there's a lot of German influence too. It's just a big, huge melting pot of music that you grow up with. And it's like Kirk Whalum used to say, there's really only two kinds of music, the kind you like and the kind you don't like. You know, because
Sure.
I mean, if you're honest with yourself and you don't put walls up on your own, you know, whatever touches you, you know, and that's what I tell people at our shows. I was like, okay, if you don't like this song, just hang on. The next song will be different.
It'll change. I always remember the line from Doug Somm, if you're going to be from Texas, you've got to have a lot of soul, you know, and when I think about because Texas is the size of many continents, you know, so
Actually,
obviously
true.
you've got so many different kinds of music there. You mentioned Delbert McClinton. You go out to sea with Delbert McClinton.
He has a cruise that he sponsors every January. It's the Sandy Beaches cruise, and it's really fun. Some people think it's the blues cruise, but it's really not, because there's blues, but there's also Zydeco and Cajun and country, and they do a lot of singer-songwriter things because he's really locked into the songwriter community in Nashville, but he's also from Texas, and they have these little salons every night where they have and some guy will start playing this song and you'll go, oh, he wrote that? I can't believe, and they wrote that, you know. I mean, it's really brilliant, and it's fun because he's been doing this for so long, and he's got such a wide open attitude that he just brings on people he likes, and rarely is there anybody really famous on there. I mean, Marcia Ball always does it, Wayne Toops. I mean, but unless you're into that kind of music, you wouldn't, you know, they're famous in certain areas. Well, just like Delbert. People in California have never heard of him. He can't get a gig out here hardly. And yet, we did the Notodden Blues Festival in Norway with him, and he got billing over Stevie Winwood there. You know what I mean? I mean, he's huge. But I grew up in Texas where it was like, well, yeah, Delbert, of course. Everybody knows Delbert. I saw him one time at Bass Hall in Fort Worth a few years ago, which is like the Disney Hall of Fort Worth, right? And it's just, you know, but that's where he's from, so it's his home people, and he's got a very loyal following, you know. But I was laughing because he's singing the song, and he sings the first verse and the chorus, and then the band's vamping, and they keep vamping, and it's obvious that he's forgotten the words. And he goes up to the mic and he says, okay, I forgot the words. And then he goes, but you know what? I don't give a shit. And everybody kind of titters, you know, in the audience, and he goes, don't you wish you could reach that level of not give a shit that I'm at? Of course, everybody started laughing, and it was like, you know, then the guitar player whispered the word, and then they went on, you know. But I love that kind of casual thing. And now, actually, I was relating that story one time at the little pub where we play all the time, and as I finished it, I realized, you know, I have reached that level.
Good.
You know,
Good.
It's like, okay.
Good.
What's going to happen? Nothing happens. That's what
Yeah.
you know, I would tell my students, is like, you know, so you make a mistake. You know, it's not brain surgery. Nobody's going to die. Nobody's going to go to war. It's like, so you make a mistake. So, you know, part of performing live is learning how to cover that up, or how to get in and out of that, you know.
I was looking at your tour schedule, and you do a lot of outdoor shows, especially in the summertime.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you like playing outside?
Love it.
Oh, cool.
Although we just did a festival in Paola, Kansas, and we were the act that was there right when the sun was just pointed right at our faces, and it was like so hot and so blinding. And we did one in Olathe, Kansas one time a couple of years ago, and it was like 110 degrees. And I mean, it was great because we were playing, and there was a large crowd of people, and they were all up there with their cameras and taking videos and pictures and stuff. And finally, over the mic, I just had to say, you know, I'm so flattered and so honored that you want to take my picture and remember this, you know, and do this. But just do me a favor. Before you post it, just look at the picture and say, would I want to look like this on the World Wide Web? You know, I'm not one of those people who continue to look pristine no matter what, you know.
The cities you're mentioning are certainly far flung, and in some and in some cases they sound like fairly small. So they must be real happy to have you come out and
Yeah.
all the way from LA to do that. Huh?
Well, yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, the one in Paola is just, that town it's not that far out of Kansas City, you know. It's just, it looks like America. It reminded me of the little town square in Back to the Future, when he goes back to the past. And the people were so nice and so down home. And then the promoter even said, because we had played there years ago, and he was saying that the festival started out as a potluck. Then kind of moved on to where they had a band. Then they had more bands. And then now it's a big, you know, it's a festival. But I love traveling, and I love being on the road and touring and playing for people. And it's really fun to see the reactions, you know, and to try to make your set list. Because like I said, we have such a variety of material. It's like, okay, we should probably put these songs in this show, or maybe these songs in this show, or, you know, it's fun.
Neat. Your career's been interesting because you, in addition to having a really viable career as a vocalist and an artist, also did the family thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's a big reason that we made the choice when we had our daughter, our first child. We made our choice to not pursue a big road career.
Sure.
You know, I mean, even though that really is what it takes to establish yourself, you really have to get out. And that's the only, you know, people start to get to know you when they see you live. And we really, you know, deliberately, you know, because Terry is such a good songwriter. Mm-hmm. And so you stay home, because that's where the money is anyway.
Amen.
Is with songwriting. So, you know, you write, you know, stay home and write. And I'll do, you know, I did like some duo gigs and solo gigs. And I mean, of course, we still played as a band a lot. And we still recorded. We've got 10 CDs now, which is crazy. But, and he would go out on the road with other people for runs, and I would stay home. But actually, it worked out really well. The problem with the touring thing was that we were not going to be touring at the level where we could bring someone to nanny them all the time, you know, and we certainly didn't want to have our children raised by who knows who at home. It was great because, as it turned out, I started getting a bunch of session work for movies and television and mailbox money, you know.
Yeah.
And it definitely increased my visibility. And although it's funny, in the blues world, I don't really lean too heavily on the fact that I was a session singer in Los Angeles, because that doesn't sound very down and dirty. You know? But it allowed me to sing for my living.
Sure.
And be mom. You know, and it was great. I helped out at the, you know, preschools, you know, and I taught my son's second grade class once a week. We did old folk songs and stuff that are getting lost, you know, and consequently, my kids are wonderful. They're great, and we're really close, and it's really fun, and things are kind of working like I'd planned. I mean, I just figured that once they got up and got gone, then it would be easy. Then we would go out and start doing our thing. You know, I mean, we've laid a lot of groundwork, a whole lot of groundwork. So. And it's starting to come true. We're starting to get out and tour more, and more people are beginning to know who we are, know our music. So
I've got to ask you this question. It's going to sound funny when I phrase it, but was there a period of time when you and your husband were both animals?
That was very clever. I'm like, first I went, oh, right, I get it. Yeah. You know, it's funny because I did get to tour with Eric Burden and the Animals for a year, which was wacky. When I first got together with my husband, he was in Eric's band. And then that kind of fell through. But many years later, my guitar player, Billy Watts, who's been with me forever, got a gig playing with Eric. Of course, Eric's band at that time was all my really good friends, you know, so a bunch of Texas guys that I knew for 20 years. And so they got Terry back in the band, and Eric came to a show that we did, and he hired the whole band back along with me. He had a new record coming out. This was like 2012, I guess. You know, I sang some backup parts, and I did some second keyboard parts. But it was the most fun thing ever, getting to tour the world with my husband and get paid for it. And really have no responsibility.
That's great.
You know, I mean, it was a lot of course, you know, touring's hard.
Sure.
But when we tour with our band, you know, we do everything. You know, I do the set list and the merch and the thing. And, you know, it's just like, you know, organize the meals. And it's just like, it's really work, really work. So it was such a joy to just be out and just kind of like, this is fun,
Yeah.
no pressure. And of course, traveling with Terry on the road in our band, we're both like really focused, and it's not as much fun. I'll just put it that way. I was always a big Animals fan.
Yeah. Well, you look at what they brought to the repertoire, like House of the Rising Sun, which was, a historic American song that a lot of people really didn't know till they heard them, or John Lee Hooker, Boom Boom, or the blues stuff that they did.
Yeah, Eric's way into the blues.
Way into the yeah.
But also their old hits were just, there were so many of them. And there were so many moments in the tour, like we were playing in Serbia at this big, it was like a wrestling arena or something. I don't know, it was a big thing. And it was an older crowd because, it's the Animals.
Yeah.
But when we did It's My Life and I'll Do What I Want, and they're all singing along, and I'm thinking, what must that song have meant to them when it came out under such an oppressive government? It really struck me. And when we played Tel Aviv, which was, speaking of outdoors, we were playing in a Roman amphitheater outside of the city that had been there for thousands of years. And it was great. And there was always one of his, I can't remember which song it was, but it was one of his old Animal hits. And it would always kind of morph into this sort of jazzier, I think maybe from his war days. I don't know, but it was called, we need peace in this world. It was, it'd go into that kind of thing. And we've been doing it every night, just like, oh, cool. But when we sang those lyrics in Tel Aviv, the crowd just erupted. And I get really emotional just thinking about it, because it's like, that's a real thing for them.
Yeah.
So it was an eye-opening experience and a wonderful life experience for lots of reasons, that was. But career-wise, it probably was not the smartest thing, because I just sort of like removed myself from Teresa James and the Rhythm Tramps for a year. And, and when they let me go, I had really been thinking, okay, what's a graceful way to extricate myself from this? I actually brought my flute out. I had played flute as a younger, in the folk world, when it was folky. And, because there's that big flute part on Spill the Wine.
Sure.
So that was fun. That was very fun.
The Hall of the Mountain King. Amazing stuff. You and your fabulous band have been performing fairly regularly at a room called the Write-Off Room.
Right.
Oh, I've been hearing such great things. Our producer, Lindsay Tomasic, says that that's an amazing place.
It really is. The sound.
Yeah.
And the fellow that runs the music there, Bill Lynch, he's a brilliant blues guitar player and singer. He hasn't performed that much. He's from Kansas. He and Mike Finnegan came out together. They're big pals. But he has attracted so many of LA's best players. It's really kind of funny because it's the write-off, like a tax write-off, right? Yeah. And there's a band that put themselves together on Friday nights called the Deductions, which is a revolving band. But it's like, it could be George Deering and Dean Parks, and Tom Scott came and played one night, Abe Laboriel. I mean, it's just like, you never know who's going to show up in a band. And Bill Lynch is actually, it's funny because you would think that a musician opening a club would open it so that they would have a place to play.
You would.
But he'd sat in a few times and people started going, come on, we want to, come on, play, So starting this month, he's going to be playing. And check this band out. It's Bill Lynch, Mike Finnegan, who is, if you don't know who he is, he's just brilliant. He played on Electric Ladyland. I mean, he's an amazing B3 player and keyboard player, but his voice is monstrous. And the Phantom Blues Band. So it's Bill and Mike Finnegan and Abe Laboriel on bass, and James Gadsden on drums. Which is just like, and if you're hearing this and you don't know who these guys are, you should look them up, because they're just legendary guys. And that's kind of how it is every night. No matter when you walk in there, you're going to hear really great music. And it's really, I love that Bill's doing this. He hadn't played around town much for a long, long time. He met and fell in love and married this lovely woman whose father started Public Storage. So, and now she's running the business, and this was always kind of their dream, was to open up a music venue where it's really about the music and not about the bar sales,
Sounds too good to be true.
Well, we're all a little nervous about it. But I was really tickled that he called me before they opened and said, would you, he didn't want to have to be in the business of booking bands. So he's doing mostly residencies. But it's a great room.
Yeah. I just love the concept. I love the concept of that. It just sounds amazing.
Well, they pay the bands.
Yeah, I know. That's even more amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
In this town, LA is such a horrible place for live music. Yeah. It's hard to get people out. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to make any money. Shoot, we play at a great little pub in Van Nuys, Ireland, 32, which I love. I love that kind of little funky bar. That's my favorite.
It's a cool place.
We don't make a lot of money, and it's better now. We used to have to bring the PA and not make any money.
Yeah.
So that we would do it, just because you want to play. But there's a fella, I don't know if you've heard of Lloyd Jones. He's a Portland-based blues guy, and he's great singer, great player, really lovely person, wonderful person. I met him on the Delbert cruise, and we hit it off, and he's brought me up several times to Portland to do shows with him up there and to introduce me to the Portland audience, and he's been, he's just wonderful, and I feel so bad. I kept saying, I would so love to reciprocate.
Sure.
But it's like, so you're going to come down here. If you make $100 a gig, that is an incredible gig here. And there it's people just, most gigs pay for the band.
Yeah, I understand.
$300 to $600. It's like, well, okay, yay. It's traveling.
Yeah, for our listeners outside of the region who don't deal with this reality, Los Angeles is not a gig town; it's a showcase town, and so there was so much competition for any type of stage and any type of venue. That those realities, and it's the same way in Nashville and New York as well.
Right. Yeah, well, Austin.
Or Austin, for that matter. Too. Exactly.
But here's the trade-off. When I moved here from Houston, I'd been singing for, many years, well, my whole life since I was a kid. But, and I met my husband. By the way, Terry Wilson is my husband.
Yes, yeah. We've been talking about him, yes. Terry Wilson.
And he and Tony Bronigal, who's a drummer, great drummer, who's really big now in the blues world, a big producer too. But they were on their way moving from London to Los Angeles, and they stopped off in Houston, and I met them, and we kind of hooked up and moved out. But so they said, well, you should come to LA. You should really be out here. You shouldn't. I had kind of done everything I needed to do in Houston. So when my original band that I was in broke up, I thought, well, I'll go to LA and I can always come back, So I'm out there and about a year later, the thing about that, I was going to say, the trade-off is that you're playing with people who are incredible players and experienced players. One of my first bands that I put together out here, that Terry put together, was Jack Bruno, who was Tina Turner's drummer, Joe Cocker's drummer. He was with Tina forever, and Paul Warren, who is now with Rod Stewart for many years, but he had just come off the road with Tina Turner, and I was so in awe. And Paul is this brilliant soloist. He's one of the best blues lead guitar players ever. And we'd go do gigs, and we'd play a slow blues or something, and he would start, and his solo would build, and it would build, and it would build, and it was just so exciting. And then all of a sudden, I got to come back and sing, and oh no, what am I going to do? So when about a year after that, or we went back to Houston and did some shows, and everybody was just like, "What have you been doing? What?"
Yeah.
Whoa, it's like I went to the graduate school of music, and just did my doctorate in singing with these guys that I'm just trying to keep up.
Yeah.
That
is an interesting thing here, where you can go to a relatively inauspicious club and hear somebody of incredible, or a church as well.
Yeah.
We have drumming for you, I believe, Jay Bellerose.
Yeah, Jay.
Yeah.
When he's around.
Yeah.
He's on the road. He's been out a lot with Alison Krauss here lately. So.
Yeah.
And he's a really he's like A-list, triple scaled, fancy pay dude, but for some reason he loves playing with us, and I love it. I have to say, we have Herman Matthews, who's brilliant and amazing, and he played, he filled in for Garibaldi with Tower of Power when he was out of commission, and we have Tony Bronigal, who I was just saying, who like toured with, Taj Mahal and Blues Brothers and Bonnie Raitt, and we have a really deep bench. I love playing with Jay because he comes from such a different attitude. He doesn't beat on the drums.
Very musical.
And he plays like kind of antique drums, really, and he's very orchestral.
Yeah.
And we just really hit it off musically a lot. It's really fun. And what's really cute about him is he plays with all these amazingly fabulous artists who play huge places and giant sheds, and and he plays on record after record after record. And his favorite thing, we walked into the Moose Lodge in Santa Monica, and he just went, "I love this place. This is my favorite kind of gig ever." And there's a tiny little joint in our neighborhood that he's going to be playing with us later in the month. And,
nice.
And he just you can just see him just light up when he gets into these really funky bars. It's so cool.
I was looking at the studio where you recorded as well. It looked like a really organic kind of an environment where you did the record.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. That's so cool that you picked up on that. Yeah, well, we do a lot of stuff at home.
Uh-huh.
We have a home studio, of course, everybody does. But this time we wanted everybody in the same, together. We kind of build the tracks, and people come in and go and do different things. And this time we recorded everything live, all playing at once and singing, and stuff. And it's called Mystic Mountain. It's off of a dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. In fact, there's lots of like places where they raise dogs, and there's a gibbon. And you can hear the monkeys.
A gibbon reserve?
I guess it is a reserve. I don't know what you would call that, but
yeah, I know the area. I know it's very, very rural up there.
Very remote. And like I said, it's like, like wooden signs with arrows pointing, and it's like at night, it's a fabulous place to see the stars. Nice. I'll just say that. But so it was a double wide trailer that he put on his property and turned into a recording studio. And some of the aspects were kind of funky. The headphone mix was kind of like, oh, no. But, but the cool thing was that his wife breeds little blonde Labrador retrievers. And they had 6-week-old puppies when we were recording. So we'd go in there and we'd record a song, and then we'd take a break and we'd all go play with the puppies. And then we'd come back out. It was like not real blues-ish, but they're just the cutest things ever. Really, really cute.
But that environment's great that you could play together. I mean,
it does. And then you do a take, and then you think, well, let's try it again. Let's do this little thing different, and it was fun. It's my favorite thing. I always keep my scratch vocals too, because when there's just something about when everything's happening all at once, you're not as caught up in your brain, or at least I'm not. You get more caught up into the actual music and the moment, as opposed to, obviously I've logged thousands of hours in recording studios, and I'm better at it. But I just met with a guy yesterday who wanted me to help him with his vocal in the studio, and I was saying, I've heard so many great live singers that just freeze up in the studio because you're hearing yourself differently, and your brain is just so much more engaged. And as any musician will tell you, you're so much better when you're not thinking so hard.
Amen.
When you get out of your head.
Yeah.
And that's my goal every time I do a gig, is just get to that zone. It's like, can I get to that point where I'm not thinking, where I'm just singing, and where I'll sing something and I'll think, whoa, where did that come from? You know what I mean? And that's easier to do when you're doing it all together than, in the studio, you're hearing every little breath and every consonant. And, it's, as my husband often will say when we're recording on our record, say, stop being a session singer, just sing, I'm like, well, I'll try. Okay.
A couple of storyophonic questions, if we will. You've mentioned you have this real wide repertoire of music, and so sometimes you will retire a song for a while and bring it back. Is there one song in your set which is consistent that you always do every performance?
Oh, okay.
And why?
There's one song, I know handsome when I see it, but I don't know when to leave it alone.
Nice.
Because it's really fun. It's a Texas shuffle kind of thing, and it's so that's one that I usually. And there's an old Alan Toussaint song called Shura. Another kind of rockin' Texas thing called I'm a Long Way from Texas. I like to do the fun songs.
Good.
You know? But then, there's also a ballad called Forgetting You, which is, we don't do that many sad songs. We do mostly, even our slow blues tend to be more sweet or thoughtful, But that's a, You Broke My Heart kind of song. And that's one that I love to sing because it's so easy to get inside of it, and not, it's one of those songs, it's kind of an Otis Redding style song where you can kind of, I try to avoid songs where I'm going to be always the same. I don't ever want to phone it in, so I try to, the songs that we do consistently are ones where I have freedom. My band is so tight though, so sometimes I feel like we're on a train going down the station and I almost forget to sing sometimes because it just seems like it would just be there, it's just like, here's how it goes, but.
Good answers. Storyophonic question number 2 for you. I think I want to ask you if you had a dream duet partner, somebody to do a duet with that you have never sung or recorded with, who might that be?
Oh, man. That's a hard one because some of my favorite singers I actually have gotten to do that with. Mike Finnegan, who's I love his singing. Greg Sutton, who I love his singing. And Delbert. I got to sing a duet with Delbert. It was a country song. It's fun. I mean, most of the ones I'm thinking of aren't alive anymore, so that's kind of sad.
Bring somebody back. You can bring somebody back. It's theoretical. Who is it?
Otis. Probably Otis. Mm. I mean, it'd be fun to sing with Tony Bennett. Yeah. I mean, he's done a lot of that. Mm-hmm. I've always been a big fan of his. That's a really good question.
I think the Tony one, I think we'll leave it on that Tony note because that's a great point of reference.
Well, because his phrasing, he's the phraser, and that's really, I don't like to get really far off of the melody, but there's so much you can do with just phrasing and just a little tweaks here and there, and Aretha was so great at that. I would have said Aretha, but she doesn't need me. It's like I wouldn't even presume to be on the same anywhere with her.
We appreciate all of this information. Your points of reference are just great. I mean, now I made notes of things to go back and listen to that you reference, and artists and genres of music, and the whole timeless element of the music that you do is just a gift, and your artistry is a gift to all of us, and we appreciate you being our guest. We appreciate it. Till we meet again, thank you for being our guest on Storyophonic.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
This episode of Storyophonic was produced and edited by Lindsay Tomasic.
The music in this podcast is used by permission from Ear Parade and Frameworks Music in Los Angeles. Music from Teresa James in this podcast is used by permission. Our theme music was written by Dusty Gray. A special shout out to our sponsors, AEA Ribbon Mics and Preamps, Universal Audio, Isotope, and Blue Designs. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back again for another edition of Storyophonic.